I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Evolution Project podcast. And you guys know this, right? If you guys don't know this by now, I'm going to remind you just one more time again. One of the things I love is that I believe that I have the coolest friends and acquaintances in the world. And the purpose of this podcast is I want to introduce my friends to you guys. I want to show you what does evolution look like, because the reality is it looks different for everybody. And, one of my friends told me there's no wrong way to do life. And I thought, geez, what a powerful paradigm and perspective to have. You guys, today we have Matt Foster with us. Matt, what's up?
Hey, good to see you, Bryan. Nice to see you again.
So you guys can't see this right now, but Matt right now is wearing an Argentina jersey. Matt, World Cup going on right now. Anything you want to share about World Cup or your love for Argentina?
Yeah, of course, go USA. We celebrated our 250-year anniversary. They got eliminated on Monday by Belgium. That was a little disappointing. So I actually should have worn this jersey when they played a few days ago, but I forgot. So I can say I'm a fair-weathered fan, but yeah, I love Argentina, love their team. It's just a bright spot for a country that's struggling with some economic woes right now. So yeah. I hope that they win.
I'm guessing that you served a mission in Argentina. Is that where this is coming from too?
Absolutely, yeah. Buenos Aires West. I got home from my mission 26 years ago, so it's been a while.
Well, me too. And anything you want to give a call? I mean, by the time people listen to this, the World Cup might be over. So are you calling that Argentina is going to win this year?
Yeah,
okay.
I am. I'm confident. These two stars here, they came before. I bought this before the previous World Cup win. I still have it, but the next Argentina jersey I get, it's going to have 4 stars on it.
Okay. There you go. You're calling your shot right now. I'll hold you up.
Yeah, I'm calling it. Okay.
All right, you guys. So Matt and I met 2 years ago. Ironically, next week, we're getting ready to leave on our humanitarian trip with Cotael down to Mexico, Chiapas. And I met Matt 2 years ago on the very same experience. That time I went with my wife. We were celebrating our 20-year anniversary. We get there. And the first night we were there, Matt's one of the first people that I meet when we get to the hotel. And I don't know if you remember this, Matt. Do you remember we went and ate tacos together at it was 11:30, midnight. And we're walking the streets trying to find a place open. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, midnight tacos with my son and my nephew and Bryan and his wife. That was fun.
Yeah, it's pretty good when the first time you meet somebody, it's over tacos in a different country. I mean, that's a pretty good start to a friendship.
Especially when they're authentic Mexican tacos.
That's right.
The best place you can get them.
That's right.
So yeah, that would be amazing if we could recruit some people through this podcast to get down to Chiapas, Mexico and have an amazing life-changing experience.
That's right. We both share a mutual friendship with Andrew Mangeris, and shout out to Cotael and all the work that he is doing. Like I said, we got our trip planned next week. Really looking forward to that. But that's not the purpose of the podcast today, Matt. The purpose of the podcast today is we meet in Mexico. We have this awesome experience. While we're down there, I believe I mentioned to you, hey, I do this really cool thing called the Evolution Project. The one thing I always try to be cautious about is I don't want to oversell Evolution Project to people that are my friends, especially people that are new acquaintances, because I just don't want to be that guy, right? I don't want to be the guy where it's hey, what's up, dude? You should come to the Evolution Project,
Yeah.
How do you remember that interaction and that conversation? And what was your first thoughts when I brought that up to you?
Well, it was so unique, Bryan, because, I was recounting an experience that just happened 3 months prior with a very close friend, relative of mine that was extremely hard for me and traumatic, and that relationship ended. And you overheard me talking about that, right? And so I feel like it was providence that here I am in Mexico and I'm seeking some sort of closure to this whole thing that was just so traumatic just a few months prior with this ending of this relationship. And here you were. So I don't think it was coincidence. I want to say that you were put there by a divine individual to hear what I had to say. And so it was just timing where I was ready for it.
Yeah, I remember we connected, we talked about it, and then I kind of left the invitation open, at the end that we have this great experience. We go down, we serve, we work hard together.
Yeah.
We have lots of conversations. We eat good food, all the elements to a great friendship. Like I've come to this place in my life where that obviously relationships are what matter most. And the more experiences that I can share with someone, the deeper that well gets. Because we have like a shared experience we can look back to and go, remember when we were mixing that cement and it was friggin' hot and those buckets of cement weighed a ton and we were just going back and forth, dumping cement. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And you also probably remember just every night we go out and eat food together and we'd sit there and talk and we went and saw waterfalls. And it's like, dude, this is awesome. So our experience in Mexico ends. I say, hey, dude, let's keep in touch. I got an evolution project coming up next year. I'd love for you to come. And that's kind of like, that was the open invitation. And I'll be honest with you, whenever I extend those, I always feel like it's less than a 50-50 that someone's going to come back to me and be like, hey, dude, remember we did that? We should totally do that again. You know, I want to come to Evolution Project, right? So did I reach back out to you when I was doing the Evolution Project that next spring? Like, you're going to have to refresh my memory a little bit about how that played out.
No, it was July that you and I met, mid-July, and through the month of August, you just said, hey, these are the dates for the ones at the end of this year. And then we have some coming up in the next year. And I said, well, I can do September. So it was like a few months after you and I first met that I was down at one of your projects in Utah.
Okay. So you come down, first Evolution Project. What came up for you? Because I mean, Matt, I think a little bit of the background that people would be important to know about with you is that you're a therapist of sorts, right? I remember at the time you were finishing a degree at Arizona State University, if I remember correctly, and you have a background in therapy, but it's a little bit different therapy, right? It's not the walk in, put my feet up on the couch and talk to you about my life therapy. What do you do by profession and trade?
Well, it's rehabilitation therapy. I'm a speech pathologist, right? So I work with actually language impaired populations with improving their expressive communication abilities and their ability to understand. But that also carries over to all aspects of language, including social language in certain situations. So so in that sense, that is how I am a therapist. When you and I met, I was seeking a second advanced degree. So speech pathologist by trade, but seeking another degree to become a dual certified. So I'll become an applied behavioral analyst and really be able to focus on the population of individuals that I really love and feel like I was put on this earth to help is the autistic population, about school age, from about age 5 to teenage years. But that's where I want craft to be honed towards.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love how you have a passion for that. And the reality is don't we all just want to be better understood? Don't we all just want to be able to communicate and express the inner parts of us to the outer parts of us? I mean, the art and science of communication, right?
Right. In fact, Bryan, later on in this podcast, I'm having all kinds of speech errors. Later on in this podcast, I'd like to kind of go into detail about like what led me to become a speech pathologist, because my story actually feeds into what I do now. It's really interesting.
So let's just kind of start to go there, right? Like, so in a summary, right? The reason I was kind of trying to bring in Evolution Project is because it's like at Mexico, I got to know a level of you, right?
Yeah.
But at Evolution Project, I feel like there was a whole new level that came out where I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't fully understand Matt, his story, where he came from, what's led him to this point. And Matt, everybody's got their story. Your story has got some uniqueness to it. And what is the saying? That which is most private is most universal.
Right.
So Matt, where do you want people to pick up in your story? Like, what do you think would be important for someone to know as we kind of dive into this conversation?
Man, you know what? So let's go back to like my very formative years, right? When I was born, okay? I was born in Germany, a military brat. My dad was on it was a 4-year deployment during the Cold War in West Germany. And so I was born there in Würzburg, Germany, and to a big family. I was the sixth. And while we were in Germany, my mom had a seventh. And then shortly after moving back to Utah, when I was like 3.5, we had an eighth. Okay. So that kind of sets the stage of my family dynamics. Two parents, my dad on a military deployment for the first part of my life. And then we moved back to Utah. So we're living in Provo, and we're just a few blocks away from my grandparents' house where my dad was raised in his teenage years. He was a pilot in the military, and this is a massive part of my story too. He was a pilot, and he was a very goal-oriented person. So we come home from Germany, and he goes from active duty to National Guard, joins the Utah National Guard, and at the same time, in about the same year, purchases a helicopter to start a private air business. And in his first year of owning that helicopter, he actually died in a helicopter crash. So that sets the stage for, I'm 6.5, and this is November of 1984. That sets the stage for early tragedy. And then during this time of me being really young and having 7 siblings, my mom's single, and we're all very young. These are formative years for all of us. So what does this naturally lead into? It naturally leads into my mom doing the best that she could, but being one of 8 siblings in the family, a lot of emotional neglect, especially after a tragedy, right? Where my dad was suddenly gone and my mom had no closure. So where does that lead? A year and a half from then, my mom meets and marries a man who turns out to be, rather than a supportive provider, protector, and preparer, that stepdad is really destructive to the family. And then, we moved to a different state because of his job. He loses his job. My mom divorces him.
So wait, you're like
single
7.
for a couple.
You're like 7 or 8 at this time. Like, how old are you right now?
Yeah. So when they remarried, I was 8.5. Or sorry, when my mom remarried, I was 8.5. And then when they divorced, I was about 11. So my mom is single for a couple years again, and then marries another man who I don't know why. I don't understand still how it became so, but this man was also abusive. He was way more abusive than the first Ken, right? I mean, we're talking like abusive to the point that my mom divorces him and he goes to prison as a result of his abuse towards me and my siblings, right? So we're talking like serious physical, sexual, emotional, and verbal abuse. So by the time they're divorced, I'm kind of glossing this over. You look like you have a question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So, and it was amongst all of your brothers and sisters. There wasn't just one brother or sister targeted. Like everyone was impacted by this.
Directly, yes, but you have the different forms of abuse where the older siblings that were out of the home, they were emotionally abused, they were verbally abused. The ones in the home were exposed to the physical and sexual.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like this is a petri dish that I'm growing up in, and that environment, somebody's hand was over that petri dish to keep it in place. And we're going to go there in a bit. In fact, should we carry on or about my formative years?
Well, what I think it's important to lay a foundation, because the thing is
yeah.
What I always like to think of is when we hear somebody or we experience them at this stage, like I always like to think, well, there's a reason people act, do, think the way they do, right? Now, the work is laced in. It's not what happened to you. The work is everything after that, right?
Okay.
And so, Matt, that's one of the things that I think is so beautiful about you, because the reality is, I look at you now, you're married, you're a great father, you're a great husband, you've adopted children, you've broke the chain, right? Like you are not who you had grow up. But the reality is has it been work? Yeah, dude, it's brought you to the depths of life, and I think it's important for people to understand like what it was like when you were growing up and what the petri dish you grew up in. So I think that's
Bryan, can I skip forward to like I feel like it's a good time for us to move on, but can I'd like to establish that foundation of where that petri dish ended before things really started, like life started to work out for
Yeah,
me.
let's go. Let's keep going. Let's go.
Okay. Yes. So like when I was 18, it's interesting, when people go through abuse and other people hear, oh, how old were you when through abuse? And they say, well, I was, 11 or 14 or 18. It's interesting how some people actually think, well, you're 18, why don't you just leave? And it's so difficult for somebody to answer that question who has been through it. You know what I'm saying? So here I am at age 18. I wrote a short story about an experience that I had that actually was about sleep paralysis. I call it the night of the demon. This happened in June of 1996. I just barely turned 18, and there was a domestic dispute that happened on that night in about 30 years ago, and I had no idea what was happening. But I felt a cold darkness. The story says that closed in on my very center, gripped me like a sudden blizzard in the middle of the summer. I fought against the sensation, trying to regain control, to move my extremities, yet despite my heaviest efforts, I could not even move a finger or toe. I focused my efforts on calling out, but nothing came, not even a peep. I still could breathe and see, but through the darkness, it was so black that it led me to think that it had invaded me and it was literally controlling me. So this kind of reminded me of a young man named Joseph Smith who, a couple hundred years ago had something similar happen and God saved him. But I go on in the story to say, yet no God came to save me. Had he abandoned me? If so, was it for my past sins? I had judged myself quite severely for the things that I did as a kid. And so eventually I regained my extremities as the icy, dark feeling inside dissipated and the demon dispersed, but I was left to deal with a simple yet complex issue. I didn't know what to do in the blackness of that room. The years that my abuser worked to isolate me from society had been successful, but that night I realized that I felt isolated from humanity and from God. But what I didn't realize was that he literally had isolated me from myself too. That was such a dark moment that I experienced at the age of 18, which was like 30 years ago now. And so that's the foundation where I want to start on that you're mentioning, Bryan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're 18, you're feeling abandoned, you're feeling alone. You're having, this is what Carl Jung calls the dark night of the soul, right? That sounds like
That's
a dark night of the soul moment for you.
Yep, very much was.
So where do you go from there?
Well, I honestly can tell you if I had access to a firearm or something sharp, if I would have thought to turn on the light, I would not be here right now. But at that point in time, like, where do I go from there? Like I remember something that night, even though I had experienced this epitome of abandonment in the dark, in the physical darkness of this room, something was still like there with me, telling me that I had things to live for. When like I said, I could have just at that point in time, humanity's abandoned me, God's abandoned me. I feel like I'm going to abandon myself. What does that mean? We can make the inference from there. So where do you go from there? I mean, here I am now. It literally became a search from that night 30 years ago till now to find myself. That's where I came from.
Yeah. I know we've had a lot of interactions over the last couple years. And, one of the things that came up for me as I think of you, I call it an evolution of the soul, right? Because you're much bigger than the last 2 years of your life. You're much bigger than the experiences you and I have shared together.
Yeah.
So I'm sharing a very small frame of it. But one of the things that I thought was so interesting is, every once in a while you'd reach out to me and you'd be like, hey, Bryan, I was journaling the other day and this came up for me. Hey, Bryan, I was doing an ice bath the other day.
Yeah.
And this came up for me. Hey, Bryan, this experience happened. I remember when you shared that one of the youth in your ward committed suicide. And you know what I'm saying is all these things surfaced something. Hey, Bryan, I ran into my brother the other day. I want to share with you what happened. And so I'm getting these little small windows into you. But you know what the thing that I noticed, Matt, is I always noticed that your heart was right. You were just trying to make sense of all these fragments and pieces of things that had
Yeah.
happened in your past that really doesn't make any sense. I mean, when you look at it and say,
Right.
why would a 6-year-old child have to go through the process of losing his father? Why would an 8-year-old child have to go through the process of his mother marrying an abusive person? Why would an 11-year-old child have to go through the process of his mother marrying another man that's even more abusive? Right? You start to
Yeah.
get into stuff. It's like, why? What did Matt just get a bad deal? A bad deck of cards dealt to him?
Yeah.
And once again, I don't make sense of it. But what I've noticed is in the 2 years that I've known you, every once in a while, I'll get a text from you. I'll get a call from you. And we have these beautiful interactions. And actually what made me want to do a podcast with you was, and I hope we talk about this. I hope you feel comfortable talking about this, was the experience you had at your father's grave was like, for me, like a kind of a full circle moment where I was like,
Right.
there was just a part of me that was like, oh my gosh, dude, he's found peace, like,
Yeah.
and I don't know how the rest of this podcast is going to go, but I feel like, if you could talk about what does a spiritual evolution look like of the soul? What is the highlight reel that's led you here to this place that have happened in private? Because the thing is I know there's someone listening to this podcast right now that's touching their chest in some way going, holy crap, Matt, me too, dude. Me too.
Yeah. I love that. I learned that through the evolution project too, where.
Yeah, that's right.
So what led me to that in the last couple of years?
Yeah, like I get these, like what I'm saying is I get these text messages. I get this, you're like, hey, I wrote this in my journal. So you know what I'm saying? Like I get these fragments of you, but like they were so beautiful because I knew that they meant so much more than what was actually being expressed, right?
Right. Yeah.
So maybe share that with me. What does healing look like for you? What has that looked like for you?
So I think that, okay, let's go back to, like, remember how I said, let's bring in the whole reason why I'm here as a speech pathologist. And in the next couple of years, I'm going to be a behavioral analyst, right? Duly certified in those two. Here is what I didn't have when I was a child. I did not have a voice, and I'm going to make a rhyme. I did not have a choice, right? And so what did that do? Since I was taught you don't have a voice, you're 6th of 8 kids, and you have a mom, right, who's already got her hands full. Okay, I get it, right? So that's just the situation. I didn't have a choice, right? Like, I'm 6th of 8 kids, right? I have to do what this abusive person says, because what else am I supposed to do, right? So I come home from my mission from Argentina, right? And go into college. And I actually want to be a counselor, but because of my trauma and in the past and tragedy and abandonment, it was like I was literally trying to jump onto a passenger train that was going 50 miles an hour. I couldn't do it because of that reflex, that autonomic response to getting off it. And then I hear about speech pathology. And I realized that those professionals get to work with individuals who are young or a vulnerable part of the population. Whether they're young or elderly, they're a vulnerable part of the population for some reason or another. And they are God's chosen individuals on this earth, by the way. I truly feel that. I think subconsciously I was led to this profession because I realized that I did not have a voice and I did not have a choice. I didn't realize this through like somebody saying that to me. I just realized over time, like my attitudes towards things, realizing certain situations, certain interactions with my family, given my birth order, it was like a pecking order of siblings. And that's natural. I mean, we've all got to vie for limited resources and limited attention. So I go into this field, and then I realize, holy crap, I'm not only teaching people how to use their voices and advocate for themselves, but I'm teaching myself that I have a voice and I can advocate for myself. And it's just became the most beautiful thing, Bryan, because since I started Evolution Project, I realized that an amazing modality for using my proclivity for words and my ability to reach out to people is I've actually started writing poems. And I did it on the anniversary of that event that I was telling you about, Bryan, where that me and that close relative of mine parted ways, and it was extremely traumatic. Like, I'm telling you, anyway, so On the annual anniversary of that was my first poem. So that was March of last year. So it's really only been like 17 months. But in that process, I think I've written 24 poems, like 24 of like all of these, you're saying smashed fragment particles. So what's like the magic sauce you're asking? For me, I mean, ice baths have helped. Giving myself time to think has helped. You teaching me, feel your heart, communicate with your heart. That's helped so much. Journaling has helped so much. Connecting with individuals that I know and trust has helped so much. But I think the number one thing actually has been the poems. Like I have this, like my friend's suicide. I wrote a poem about that. That brought me solace. And then I was able to read that to his mom. And she was so like moved by it. I actually read that poem at his funeral. And then like just a couple of weeks ago, my brother who served 2 combat tours in Iraq, he said, you know what, my counselor actually mentioned that poetry would be like really, really fulfilling for me. And he asked me to write him a poem, and I did. And I feel like I freaking rocked that poem. Like he loves it. And it's like that's been my thing. That's been my sauce that I realized, going from that dark room after the night of the demon where I had that sleep paralysis incident to where I'm at now, I'm realizing that my words are power. They're power for me and for other people. And I think that's why I'm on this earth.
I'm going to ask a favor of you. Do you have a poem available that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah.
And would you what would you like to leave people with? Like, I think you just said it, man. I think you landed on some really solid ground right there. And I'd love to hear a poem, and I'd love to hear the backstory and the healing that happened from the poem. Is that okay?
Okay. Yes. In fact, Bryan, you mentioned earlier that really spiritual experience that I had, and this was like 3 months ago, Bryan, with a poem. Can I share that? It's 5 minutes long.
That's okay. You've
okay?
got my attention, and my take is if somebody doesn't want to listen, they can push fast forward. But I want to listen to it.
True. Okay, so and we're going back to the day of my dad's funeral, right? So like one day he's on this earth, the next day he goes on a helicopter ride, the next day he's freaking gone, right? So like the past 40 plus years from me, I've had no pictures to remember that poem, but I've got snippet memories. So this poem is based on the snippet memories that I've got, and I just put them into words. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, it's called His Flag Draped Coffin. It says, a couple days before Thanksgiving in 1984, I walked into a church, but not to worship. The air was chilly, and a light snow coated the ground. Wasatch Mountains towering above witnessed the scene. The morning sun shined on a brown Cadillac hearse, which waited patiently to receive his flag-draped coffin, to take it on a ride to a few miles north and deliver it into a void dug 6 feet deep after removing the flag draped on his coffin. I walked through the doors and down the hallway to the room that contained his closed flag-draped coffin. I was not prepared for what I would see, that first reunion with my departed dad, dressed in his flag-draped coffin. Alone in the room, opposite wall to the doors, was a sight that I had never witnessed before. On a rolling stand 3 feet above the floor was my dad lying in his flag-draped coffin. A child of only 6.5 years old rarely has to see his dad, a man with a few token grays, cocooned within his flag-draped coffin. In my mind's eye, I remember standing mesmerized, staring eye level at the side of his flag-draped coffin. Deep in my memory, I do recall and will never forget something that he taught me as a boy when he said, "Every morning, son, it's important to always make your bed, with the bedding tucked tight enough to bounce a quarter." That is something that he gained from his drill sergeant over 15 years earlier as he embarked on his journey that ended with him in his flag-draped coffin. That flag wrapped so tightly, tucked so thoroughly, I could picture his drill sergeant with starched BDUs and a flat-brimmed hat, standing over and bouncing a quarter on the top of his flag-draped coffin. The red, white, and blue, did I know what it meant? Did it bring closure to my bewilderment? I couldn't approach. I had no desire to touch my dad resting within his flag-draped coffin. I was so detached from feeling, but time fills in the blanks, now filled with sadness, curiosity, confusion, and aversion. Memories of his flag-draped coffin moment are disjointed. I'm not sure how long my family stood alone in that room. To me, it's vague when it became filled with family and friends. but present were many tall, uniformed military men. This was a military funeral. They came to take care of their own. Hence, they would be attending later to witness the sow of my dad, the U.S. Army captain, into the silent earth. Their brother in arms, reposing in his flag-draped coffin. But there they stood together, surrounding the colors to which they pledged oaths that covered his flag-draped coffin. So here we were in this room, packed full of people, inside the building that was peaked with a steeple. A young boy's memory does not contain every sequence of events that actually occurred. Next, I recall sitting in the front pew next to my mom, less than a few feet away from his flag-draped coffin. I saw it through tear-filled eyes, closer than I wanted to be. I closed my eyes, hoping that I would not see the image of his flag-draped coffin. I acknowledged that people gave eulogy, but I don't know for how long. And I know that time was taken for us to participate in song. But the only image that I can never replace, the memory of his flag-draped coffin in my face. I held on to my mom. I needed a physical anchor, but I'm sure that she was empty as a drained oil tanker. I think something inside her died. It literally sank her as she and I sat within reach of his flag-draped coffin. So close and so far away is what comes to mind as we passively looked on, not comprehending the scene. After final song, remarks, and prayer, my dad was moved by pallbearers into the brown hearse, his final ride, with him still in his flag-draped coffin. My Uncle Skip's Dodge van may have been a few cars behind. From there, I recall standing to see the hearse within my sight. We moved slow. Everyone headed in the same direction. No one wanted to say goodbye to the man in his flag-draped coffin. Finally, at the cemetery we arrived, the field nearly empty of headstones. My memory recalls a loud 21-gun salute and a lone taps trumpeter. It also contains the recollection of the 4 Cobra gunship flyover in missing man formation. What it does not recall was the folding and surrender of the American flag to my mom, minting her a new military widow. Decades of time have now passed. The eyes that visualized those events are still visualizing. The brain that recorded those events is still recording. The memory of his flag-draped coffin contained in this brain has evoked different emotions. As a child, his flag-draped coffin evoked deep longing, sadness, revulsion, and fear. As a teen, his flag-draped coffin evoked dissociation and avoidance. As a young adult, his flag-draped coffin evoked anxiety and longing. As a middle-aged adult, his flag-draped coffin evokes peace and connection. I have no memories to view, I have no pictures to view of his flag-draped coffin. I only have a memory that poetry can capture, one of his flag-draped coffin. So that was written by me 2 days before his, what would have been his 79th birthday. He died at age 37.
Flag-draped coffin. I'm guessing that's the name of the poem.
You got it.
So
26 references.
You write the poem.
Yeah.
And then, if I remember correctly, did you go to your father's grave to go read the poem to him?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And it was all happen chance. Like, it wasn't planned, because I live in Idaho Falls. He's buried in Orem, Utah, right? So yeah, we went down there, my daughter and I, and it was a beautiful evening. We had about half an hour of time before we needed to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I laid on his grave and had my phone above me like this. And I mean, just the most beautiful, miraculous thing happened that actually, brings closure. And isn't that the whole reason why we're doing this podcast, Bryan? Is for people who don't have that closure, who have so many fragmented, shattered things in their life, shattered plans, shattered relationships. So the closure comes for me 42 years after my dad dies. 41 years, 41. I'm laying on his grave. I'm reading this poem, and my daughter is standing or 10 feet away. She's sitting in the open door of our SUV, and surprisingly, she's a teenager, but surprisingly, she sits through this poem silently and mesmerized. When I finished reading the poem, I looked at her and I said, "Jocelyn, if Grandpa Clyde were here, what do you think he would say to you?" And what her response was that she gave me totally just was the last thing I was expecting. She said, "I think he's here." And I said, "Wait, tell me that again?" She said, "He's here. He's sitting next to you." And I'm like, "Okay, what exactly are you seeing?" And she said that when I first started reading the poem, like 5 minutes of reading, right? She said she was fixating on me and there was a grass patch right next to me. And she was like, it looked like a fuzzy TV. And she said that as she focused more on that fuzzy part of the grass, things came into view in her mind. A vision was literally opened up to her where she saw him as a spiritual being seated next to me, cross-legged, and just seated within inches of me. And she said that during that poem, he just looked at me so intently with so much love that a father would have for his son, even though it's been 41 plus years, right? That it was like he's never been out of my life. And then she said, there's love so great that I felt it. This is Jocelyn, my daughter. And so that moment was just like, I mean, Bryan, we could finish up this podcast talking about the Evolution Project and how it talks about a hero's journey. This was a hero's journey. If you want to say it was a hero's journey of 41 years, you could say that. If you want to say it was a hero's journey of from the process of me writing that poem on February 8th to like mid-March, 5 weeks, you could say that. But that was the miracle wherein that hero's journey occurred.
Matt, I just want to tell you, I am so grateful that you were able to, one, that we're friends, that we met each other, that we've been, friends only for 2 years, but it feels like I've known you for a really long time. And
yeah,
you did exactly what I was hoping would happen today. You opened up and you played full out, which is how you live life. And you shared a very, important part of your journey. And the reality is that is it. The hero's journey is that you return to the beginning, whole, complete, and you're in the same spot, but you're in a completely different place because your heart has gone through the work, the evolution, and we find ourselves whole and complete. And we realize it's going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. In the end, everything makes sense, even when it doesn't make sense. And your journey was 41 years, And Matt, I just want to tell you thank you for sharing what you shared today. I love how that poetry has become a modality for you to express and connect and heal. And, my hope is that people walk away from this getting to hear with their heart and their ears what evolution really looks like and what healing really looks like. And I think you nailed it, dude. And I love you. And I'm grateful for what you've shared today. Anything you want to leave before we close this thing up today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I can honestly tell you this, Bryan, that I would not have tapped poetry if I did not, if the creative vein was not stimulated in me as a result of these evolution projects. That would not have tapped that in me. Poetry is not that creative vein, that outlet for everybody. I get it, but everybody's got some outlet, and I think that involvement in the Evolution Project can just say, hey, this is what it looks like for Matt, but what's it going to look like for Joe and James and Jackson and Jimmy and however many other J names I can come up with? It's going to look different, but the fact is it's the same theme.
That's right. That which is most private is most universal. And that's just the truth. So for those of you that have been listening to our podcast today, thank you. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for listening to my friend, Matt Foster. Matt, if anybody wants to reach out to you, if anybody wants to connect with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah. Do you want me to just send you like an email, Instagram, Facebook?
That's what we'll do. We'll post
you, and
we'll
you can
post it
give
up
it
in
as
the
an
link.
attachment.
We'll post it up in the content.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to reach out to connect with you, share their story, whatever that looks like, I think that would be awesome. Thanks for being willing to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love human connections. That's why I'm here.
All right, man. Well, very well. Thank you very much for your evolution, your sharing of your evolution, dude.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful time.
Thank you for being there, and thanks for opening that door for me, Bryan.
Yeah. Awesome. First podcast. Crushed it, bro. All right, everybody. Until next time.